Hi, folks, and welcome. Today I am joined by Sam Bhagwat, who I met. Actually, it's a funny story because I knew your name but didn't knew your face, let's
Uh-huh.
say. And I rediscovered you while browsing Amazon for any nice books about AI agents and stuff like that.
That's great.
Exactly, and I've discovered your book, Principles of Building AI Agents, which is a very nice book. We will discuss later. We will go a bit more into details.
Yeah.
But in my mind was, where do I know this name? Where do I know this name? And only after that ticked for me that I actually know you from your Gatsby.js days.
That's great.
I built a couple of sites on Gatsby. Thank you very much for making that framework and making so, I don't know, developer ergonomic, let's say.
That's great. Such a great story, Daniel. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Uh, Really glad to be here.
Thank you, thank you. Let's start directly with the meat of the main course of the discussion. What is Mastra AI? Because this is your current project right
Yeah,
now.
that's right. So Mastra is a open source JavaScript framework for building AI agents. The backstory here, we spent most of the last decade in open source JavaScript world, and have been building Gatsby for most of a decade. It was building Gatsby for most of a decade. We sold Gatsby to Netlify in 2023, and then we were at Netlify for most of 2023.
Ah, okay.
Uh, yeah, and so now Netlify is kind of the custodian of the Gatsby project now, and then left and kind of I was actually like, I had a lot of fun building dev tools and like maybe I'm gonna go build something that's something else now. So I started building a CRM with a couple of the engineers
Mhm.
from Gatsby, Shane Thomas and Abi Ayer, and we actually started building the AI parts of the CRM using LangChain, and it just didn't feel right to us actually. And one day we just kind of like looked at each other and we were sort of like, well, gosh, like this sort of like JavaScript framework stuff is something we know a little bit about. So maybe we should go and actually build a AI JavaScript framework. And so that was in October. And that was 6 months ago, and it's been pretty awesome to see what's happened since.
I see. Nice, nice. And I'm super happy to see more and more people that are building. I'm not sure if I'm using the correct term, but building AI tooling for JavaScript. For the
Uh-huh.
JavaScript community, because everything, and actually you mentioned in a couple of tweets, everything is Python based, and yeah, maybe that's the perfect language to, or a great language to train models. But I people who are actually the builders, the vast
Yeah,
majority are in the JavaScript world. And
exactly.
yeah, from an integration point of view, I feel that JavaScript is a way better tool, a way better language to express this integration part.
Yeah. And I wrote Python in the early days of my career. But I think, language, there's not a lot of people that would just sort of write it. There's some people they'll just write it in whatever language, but a lot of us have language preferences. And Tyler, one of the engineers on our team, was making a presentation at Vancouver JS last night, and he made these slides that were like, Python trains, but
Yeah.
JavaScript ships, and of course it had all the great Studio Ghibli like graphics and stuff. But like like a lot, and I think he said something in his slides. He was like, a lot of us just don't want to use Python. Uh, and this, there's also something nice about being able to use JavaScript for your front end, JavaScript for your back end, and JavaScript for your AI bits. And we see actually a lot of folks who maybe put down coding a few years ago to do another job, and they're kind of coming back, with Lovable and all these AI tools, and when they're coming back, whatever they wrote in before, maybe they were building, Ruby on Rails apps or whatever they wrote in before, they're coming back as full stack JavaScript developers.
Yeah, yeah. As like a personal story, I mentioned to you at the beginning of this recording about LangChain, and I tried at one point. I've also tried. Okay, I will go full swing in the Python world. No, I'm sorry. I mean, I love the Python syntax. It's a delight. I mean, I was a big fan of CoffeeScript. Maybe you remember when CoffeeScript was around.
I remember that. That was a good time.
Exactly. And I loved the syntax of Python, but the tooling behind how to install in packages. So I don't know. It's JavaScript feels much more natural.
Yeah, I think it's also just like we spent, it's not like we don't have our own issues like MGS, CJS, but like sometimes you just get used. You'd rather have the issues that you know about than the issues that then you don't know about, right?
Yeah, indeed. Good point. Tell us a bit more about Mastra AI. How does it help a developer? What modules that it provides, features, anything like? How would you introduce it to a JavaScript guy?
Yeah, so I would say like there's whenever you're doing something building an AI application, essentially what you should think about is at the core you have this engine, which is the LLM, right? Which is this incredibly powerful thing that's kind of hard to control. And when you're building an application around the LLM, you're almost building this like harness around this like really powerful engine. And so one of the most important things to be able to do is just really understand really well, okay, when I put X in, I get Y out. And when I put, X prime in, I get Y prime. And like, get that, because, and so like, what we did, one of the first things that we did when we were building Mastra is we built a really awesome dev environment. And so, if you start up Mastra, you'll just see the CLI install experience, and it'll install like a demo agent and a demo workflow. And then you can spin up the local dev server. And then you can chat with that agent, kind of see, okay, anecdotally, I'm putting this in and kind of getting that out. But then you can kind of go from there and actually see the tracing. So you can see, oh, literally, like, here's the whole call stack. Here's what I'm feeding the agent. Oh, it decided to like do a tool call. Okay, now I saw that it did a tool call, and this is the input that came in from that I sent a tool. If you're not, if you haven't used it before, is just a function that you're giving an agent that the agent can choose to use, or it can just choose to generate text instead of using the tool, right? But you can see, oh, it chose to use the tool, and this was the input to the tool, that was the output. Oh, then it took this output, and then given that, then it generated the next thing. You can just see the whole call stack all the way down, all the inputs, all the outputs, all your latency, the latency of every step. And that, when you're, not just prototyping, but also trying to take something into production, that sort of like loop of like, I did this thing, we talk about this, like this loop where like, oh, I changed some code and then I immediately saw like my UI changed in the dev server. Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like I need to be able to change the prompt that I sent into the LM or the data that I provided in the context, and I need to be able to see, oh, hey, the LM did something different with the new stuff that it provided. So I think like that's the most sort of like the biggest reason I would say you should use Mastra. We also give you a lot of primitives, agents, a structured workflow graph, kind of based on X state, on top of X state. We give you sort of the ability to have memory. So just what that means is that, let's say that we're having a conversation, and you ask me what I did last weekend. Well, like I'll just like take our most recent few messages that was exchanged, and now I'll go search in my head for like what events did I do last weekend, and I'll take those things and I'll synthesize it together, right? So it's like the ability to take like a very long amount of events, but like only in this case like a chat history, but only sort of compress it to the recent ones and then like the relevant ones to the query, and sort of return a response from that. So like memory, then like tracing, evals, which are basically LLM tests, kind of these statistical tests
There
where
is
you can.
also a eval module included.
That's correct. Yeah. And so like we have all these kind of like modules to help you, but I think like at the core of it, it's just that loop between I did this thing and I could sort of see the output of that thing, and I can see how as I'm changing what my prompt is in the context that I'm giving to the agent, to the LLM, here's what's changing
Correct.
in the output.
Correct. Indeed, I can totally relate to that because I feel that one of the most challenging things with LLMs and agents in special, not LLMs indeed, are, but agents in particular, is the tracing part. That's how, because it's a bit magic. I mean, sometimes it goes off the rails and you would like
Yeah.
to know why, at least to update your prompt after that, like,
Yeah.
dude, don't do this if this don't
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. No, exactly. And but and that's the feeling that a lot of people had when they were working with no framework or working with other frameworks, is they just kind of they felt like they couldn't really figure out what the model was doing with and then they were like and then sometimes other frameworks might like kind of sandwich the prompt that they gave into another prompt, and then like even if they could change it, like it didn't change the sandwich prompt, and then they felt like they didn't have control. Usually if you hear that someone's like rage quit some agent framework, that's why they rage quit it.
Correct, correct,
Like
correct. Indeed,
anecdotally.
indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
Great point. Um, Tell us a bit more about the book. How did the book came to be? What led you to the conclusion? Okay, let's build this. Let's publish this book.
It was funny. I think like we'd written a lot of this in the docs, and we were in the winter batch of Y Combinator. So
Okay.
what that meant is that like Shane, Abby, and I were living in the Dogpatch neighborhood in San Francisco. We were and we were just spending a lot of time with the other 170 startups in this batch, because we and a lot of them, about half of them, were building these what's called AI agents.
Really?
And so
So
what that means,
from
yeah,
170, almost half of them were.
we're building these various kinds of these vertical AI agents. And so they were building maybe medical transcription for veterinarians, or they were building like CAD diagram generation for aerospace, like a lot of these kinds of companies, right? And obviously very small, very young. But these are the products that we're building for these kinds of like end users. And so a lot of them ended up coming to us to sort of like, hey, how do I do this LM, this this agent stuff, or how do I do RAG, or how do I do tracing, how do I do evals? And we actually ended up inviting a lot of them over to our sort of apartment office for these kind of like whiteboarding sessions,
I see.
where they would sort of be like, here's what I'm doing, and diagram this out, and maybe like, hey, you're doing this one LLM call that trying to diagnose like 12 different symptoms. Maybe it should be like 12 different LLM calls, and you can like join the responses together. You might find it's more accurate that way. We'd have a lot of these kinds of conversations, and we found that we were like talking through a lot of the fundamentals and the principles of like agent development and AI in AI engineering. And so we were like, well, maybe we should just take some of the lessons that we've been like sharing and like teaching, and just sort of put them in a book, so that like it's more, this is a packaged way. Like if we keep having these conversations, I mean, we loved having these conversations, but
But
maybe it'd be a better way of distributing the knowledge. So that's kind of how it started.
indeed. Really nice. In my opinion, it's I would recommend the book to anyone who wants to get started. It's a gentle introduction to the world of AI engineering. It's not
Hmm.
like it's you can read it in one day. It starts with your story in the apartment and so on, and after that you cover all the main or many of the main topics that are. And what I really like in particular is the fact that it's not intimidating. You're not like going
Thank you.
into crashing details or something like that. Maybe you can share like a bit about the topics in the book. Like what I know that you are, of course, you are mentioning RAG, but what are the other topics that you cover in the book?
Yeah, so I think like we kind of start out with like what is an agent? I think we obviously all we've all used LLMs, but I think one of the questions is like, well, what is an agent? And so we kind of talk about this sort of agentic spectrum, which is, let's say that you have, let's say that you're giving an agent, we talked about tools, like a function that it can call, like that makes it, or like, let's start with like, what's not an agent? Well, let's say I have a transcript and it's like a Loom transcript or something, and I'm just like sending it, to a LLM to like, hey, can you like auto generate like a headline or auto generate like a summary? It's like, that's not an agent. This is like a single shot like LLM transformation. You took some data in and you threw it in the LLM, you got some data out the other end, right? But then like if well, let's say you start giving your agent, these tools, these functions that it can call. Let's say you give it, memory, and it can kind of like compress like its whole chat queue of messages into sort of with search. Let's say that you ran it in a loop and you sort of gave it the ability to kind of like, well, take your task and like divide it into subtasks. Now let's say that you gave it like a sandbox, like a Docker container that it could like run some code in, and then evaluate the responses from that code, and then like write more code and evaluate, and then you start running that in a loop. Okay, like you're kind of going higher and higher up this like agentic spectrum, basically. And so we talk about like that's like, I think agents and all these like sort of sub things like tools and memory are one of the first pieces of the book. We talk about prompts. So I actually like one of the things that people have been like very interested in is I embed, it's just maybe it's an excerpt from the bolt.new prompt. And it's a very, I think that struck people a lot because they're like, oh wow, I mean, we all write prompts and like, there are a few lines, and like you look at this prompt and it's just, it's sort of thousands of characters, and I just embed like a short part of it, and people are like, oh, so if I'm building like a production agent that's maybe writing code, this is the level of detail that I need to get into. And I think that ends up being like a light bulb moment for a lot of folks who read the book.
If it was something, there were multiple ideas. I have something like highlighted some of them in the PDF, but if it's just one thing that pops into my mind, it's that screenshot of the prompt, which actually is just 1/3. I think you mentioned that it's only 1/3 of the. So it's a big thing. Yeah. Please.
No, go for it.
Okay. What would you recommend to someone? And of course, many also from the Gatsby.js world, but like in general, developers are very interested in AI engineering, but don't know how to start. Given the fact that you are multiple steps ahead in this journey, how would you recommend, I don't know, let's say a traditional web developer to educate herself or himself or in this field? What will be the steps, like the building block?
For sure. So obviously there's the book. We have a, please feel free to read the book, and we also, it's on Amazon. There's also a free copy on our website. It's on like mastra.ai/book, and you can get but I think like most of us are pretty practical folks. Like we like reading, and reading is educational for us, but we also get the most sort of practical knowledge by doing practical things. And so I would kind of encourage folks to do some AI engineering. And I think that the easiest way to do that, if you're a JavaScript person, is just sort of like just play around with Mastra. You can npm create Mastra, which will install a project. So it's just npm create Mastra, and like play around with the dev playground. Okay, like once you get to sort of like, hey, I have this agent that does like, has a tool call, right? Like, okay, like try changing the prompt, right? Like, try, what happens when you change the prompt? What happens? And then the next, if you want to like make a next step beyond that, I would just like think of something like fun in your life that like you could like use some help with. Maybe you want to build a cooking agent, right? Like you have like, you want to be able to like have some simple interface where you can just type in a list of ingredients that you have in your house, and it can suggest a recipe for you, right? It's like that's something you might use every day. My co-founder Shane, he's working on a children's storybook. So like he has a 3-year-old daughter, and so like he wants to be able to give it like a prompt, and then it'll like write a story for him to read to his daughter at night, and generate some pictures. So like that's the kind of thing that's like it's like a fun thing to do, right? And I think this is like very much informed by what we if we rewind back to 2016, right? People were using Gatsby to build a lot of like blogs and portfolio sites. And like why were people doing that? Well, it was because like React was pretty new. And like, maybe we were like front end developers at a place where we were like thinking about like migrating over from Backbone or something, right? But we're not gonna just like take React and like be like, okay guys, it's time to embark on this year-long like migration project. It's the future. It's like, it's more like, I've been like playing, I've been using this technology for a few projects. I really like the ergonomics of it, but like to get that confidence, you just really need to play around with it first. And so like I think that's like my biggest encouragement to folks who are like really curious about the AI engineering is just play around with it. Like that's absolutely the first step.
Correct. Nice. I feel that prompt engineering, even maybe it's a fancy word, but prompt engineering, it's almost at the level of working in console, like as a developer, working in the terminal.
Mhm.
And I think it's a crucial skill to get it right, because basically that's how you communicate with the LLM in the end. In your learning journey, did any resources stuck to your mind, like from a prompt engineering point of view? Like I read that, and after that, things opened up, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most helpful thing you can do if you're sort of getting started with prompt engineering, is just ask the AI to write you a prompt. And I think it's like most interesting to do in a visual sense. Like, if you were like, hey, can you write a prompt to generate a picture of wildlife playing in the park or something. I think I was doing this when I was with my I've got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and like a 7-year-old is like very into seals and sea lions and kestrels and all this stuff, right? So like and then like it wrote this incredibly detailed prompt, and it was like it's sunset over a river with a few trees nearby. There's a kestrel flying overhead, and a seal and a sea lion are playing in the river. Because if you it just like goes on like that for a couple paragraphs. Because if you give it sort of like it's almost like a seed crystal approach. You give it like the very bare essence of it, and then the LLM can kind of take your like very bare prompt and write it into like a much more detailed prompt. And of course you can edit that, but like I think then like you do that a few times. And again, I just encourage folks to do that in kind of like just find a fun moment where like I was honestly having fun with my kids, and, and they were like, "Oh wow, this is so cool," uh, like find those kind of fun moments where you can just like or fun instances where you can take where you can play around with the tooling. And I think like after I did that a few times, like you just got a little bit of sense of like, okay, this is what a really good prompt looks like. And then suddenly when I was like writing production prompts, my level of production prompts actually got like much better from this just like fun playing around with like with the prompt writing with my kids, right?
Oh, very interesting. It's not very, and it's actually the second time I'm hearing this idea to actually ask the LLM what should you say to it. Is very like meta,
Oh, totally, yeah.
in session style.
Yeah, it is Inception style, and I think like a lot of these things are like, it's kind of like, it's just this like one. It's like, hey, what's the one weird trick for writing great prompts? Well, it's
Mhm.
just ask the LLM. It's so a lot of AI engineering is this collection of the one weird trick to do this thing. Well, and after the thing is though, after you learn like 10 tricks or 15 tricks or 20 tricks, like you get to be a lot better at AI engineering. And that's just that it's just a learning process to like go through those like one weird trick moments.
Nice. nice. Actually, one former guest of the podcast, Rishi, mentioned that he has a video on this, and he is trying to convince the LLM to write in a particular way. And even if
Uh-huh.
you give it, okay, here's a book that I've written, write this in my style. Initially,
Yeah.
it's still generalistic, but after that, if you go to the LLM and ask it, what makes a unique writing style, and it will
Hmm.
spit up all, and then like vocabulary, order of words, whatever, long or short sentences and so on. And after that you say to the LLM, analyze this book from the all the topics you mentioned above, and only after that it's able to replicate way better the writing style. It's exactly the same, somehow it's exactly the same idea with what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like a lot of these are like you're sort of like because think about an LLM as a general purpose intelligence, right?
Yeah.
This thing could write, engineering specs. It could write, works of fiction. It could like write art criticism. It could write, there's like so many. It could write, like I don't know, chat messages you're putting on a dating app, but like it's a general purpose intelligence, and so it really needs a lot of training on like what the not like training like people think about it, but it needs a lot of context is
Yeah,
probably a better word. It needs a lot of context on like what the specific writing style that you want it to go down is, and like how you want it to, and like the more context like you give it, the more it knows to like, so for example, like in my cursor rules, when I'm like writing the documentation of master's documentation, I have things like, do not use do not use marketing type language. Do not use words like out of the box and easy and just and all these things that like we as developers are like kind of allergic to, because like like it's trained on a lot of like this that
exactly.
kind of corpus, and I just have to like direct it to the part of his corpus. It's like facts only, guys. Short code snippets and short introductions to those code snippets. No, don't like over exaggerate or promise the moon. But like when you sort of like give it some examples, then it sort of like goes down that path more easily, right?
Yeah. Great point. Great point. And I would add one small completion to what you said. When building fun projects, I think uh, fewer shorter projects, smaller projects, sorry,
Yes.
multiple smaller
Yeah.
projects are better than a big single one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Try all kinds, like try a project with a multimodal approach. After that, try something like you said, to generate a story, and after that, and so on, instead of just uh, trying something direct in production, like try, okay, I
Yeah.
built just one project, it will be, yeah, it will be big.
Here's the funny thing is I honestly think that the more we're in tune with like that play part of ourselves, like the easier it is to like learn, because the beginning parts of like learning AI engineering feel a lot like play,
Yeah,
and it feels weird because you're like, well, I want to build this production thing. It's like, okay, but like let's just build this fun side thing first. Like honestly, well, it'll just be a lot easier to like figure out the iteration cycles if I'm just like, well, but this is what I want for my cooking agent or for my
exactly.
children's storybook agent or like whatever kind of like little like fun project that you have. And then like then it's a little, like also like if the person you're working on is in production, that's great too. Just make sure that you're sort of like it's almost because also like some of these like tricks are these weird tricks, and you almost if you have that like Joker mindset, it makes it easier for you to unlock whatever weird thing it is. Like, oh, I just like added this weird thing to the prompt and it suddenly performed much better. Okay, like
Yeah.
like
Exactly. Speaking about the fun part, which I think is very important, I think you mentioned in one video, maybe the most recent video that you made, that sometimes it feels like the age of the dawn of internet again, like with AI.
yeah.
And I'm feeling exactly the same. Like from the moment, okay, switching from React to Vue, well, not such a big React from Angular. Okay, there are all the same thing. But from the moment I started to play with like AI engineering and so on, it feels again like I'm starting programming from scratch. I don't know how it was for you, but for me, it was exactly the same feeling.
Yeah. No, because there's just like there's this feeling of like joy and like wait, I can do that?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I was like, I think like I was 8, and I think I was writing in like QBasic or something. Like, I was like, I wrote a program that like it intoned like different, like it outputted things at different levels of at different frequencies, and then I just had it run in a loop where it would go increasing frequencies. And I'm in Bombay.
yeah.
Like, my parents are there, my grandparents are there. When I discover something like fascinating, which is that, like, you know like, as I'm having it like go up the frequencies, first my grandfather can't hear it, and then my grandmother can't hear it, but my parents and my sister and I can still hear it, and then my parents can't hear it, and just now just like my sister and I could hear it, and I was like, whoa, I just did this thing and like learned this thing about human auditory ranges. But it's like that same kind of like fun, like joyous discovery, experience that, like, and I like that. And like, I also, like, you have a lot, like, I live in, I spend a lot of time in the Bay Area, like, like I have a lot of friends in the Bay Area, like, and all of, like, a lot of friends are just like in different parts of becoming like AI pilled or like agent pilled, right? um uh, and so you sort of, you see, you watch people go through this like journey um where sort of like they're like, oh, what is this AI stuff? Like, it's all hype. And then like they really start using it, and they're like,
No.
oh no, it's like magical. And then
Yeah,
like, it's almost like this transformation process that I have, like, myself gone through, and then I also watch like a lot of friends go through as well.
yeah. It's sometimes it's a mix of scary and fun in the same time. It's
Mhm.
like it's really the more I play with it, the more I feel that intelligence from artificial intelligence, the intelligence part is real. It's not just a marketing gig. I mean, you
No.
almost feel it. It's okay, not alive, but you get the
Yeah.
point. I mean, it surprises you. It
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I don't know if you have read the Pragmatic Programmer book. In there is a chapter where like the knowledge base of a developer is compared with a stock portfolio. So
Mm,
you
interesting.
put your learning chips into React. Maybe it will go big, maybe not. If React becomes the new thing, you will win big.
Mhm.
Otherwise, yeah. And so on. So the idea is basically for a developer to gather knowledge, and some of them will go big. Otherwise, it is what it is. If you have to place a bet like this, so you have some time, you have to acquire some knowledge. Where would you place your learning chips in the moment? What do you feel it will become? And again, it's a bet. You cannot. I don't know. Nobody is asking you to say what's in the future. But where would you place your bet as a engineer, as a developer? What would you focus for the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think like like, I love that example, and I think like it's kind of like thinking about the same thing you do if you look at the stock market. You think about like, what are the trends, and like what's going to get big in the future. Um and and I think like, because like, almost every company everywhere, from the CEO on down, is kind of like, hey, how do we AI AIify ourselves? And I think like, how do we build agents, right? I was, you know, we were like, I don't know, like, the TV was on yesterday, and like there was some Salesforce agent commercial, and like, okay, I don't know how good any of the Salesforce agents are, like, really, like, but like, right, but I mean, agent, like, and a lot of the thing is like, some of the agents right now are toys, some of the assistants right now are toys, but like, they get better over time, because the models get better, the underlying abstractions get better. And I think this is something that we can underestimate as developers, is like, this is like a scaling law that maybe like, machine learning folks are more familiar with. Like, language translation was never any good, and then Google threw three orders of magnitude more data on it, and it got better, right? The models just keep getting better, like the frameworks keep getting better, all the abstractions around it keep getting better. And as organizations get better at like figuring out how they do this, you know, I think like what are the net new projects that organizations are going to build over the next 5 years? Well, like largely AI stuff. I mean, there's obviously going to be non-AI stuff too, but if it's 50% AI stuff, and then these are like the new projects that like are kind of the sort of like the things that everyone wants to be on, the things that the CEO is kind of calling out in all hands or whatever, right? Like, and if you're thinking about from a career perspective, like what do I invest in? Like, I think they kind of like look, it's really advantageous, to be able to know how to use these technologies because like of course there's going to be things that aren't AI that also happen, but because people are realizing how big this is and all the energy and attention is there, it's just very advantageous to be able to be the person that can, maybe be on that project or maybe lead that project or maybe, yeah, or maybe you're building the front end for that project, but like knowing the underlying abstractions that are being used is like very helpful. So like you can, rather than just another front end developer that doesn't have an AI, background or knowledge. So I think it's the old Wayne Gretzky quote. He's like, how did you score so many goals? Well, I skated to where the puck was going. Like,
Correct,
this
correct.
is where the puck is going.
Correct, correct, correct. Indeed, and especially what you mentioned in the beginning, like the fact that half of the startups in YC were somehow related to AI agents. I mean, you have a different view being directly in the Bay Area versus, for example, me being in Europe. Like between the two, not between the two of us and the rest of the internet, nobody in here is very preoccupied about AI, and I'm like, dude, this is the future. Like it cannot be just in my head. So very interesting what you say. Sure.
Yeah, I think it's advantageous for a lot of people to just understand how trends and influence move throughout the world. And I'll just give another example. Like, I met a friend like about 10 years ago, and he does this like really he has this really interesting business. He's like a restaurant guy, but he does a particular type of restaurant. He follows what's trending on Instagram in like New York City and LA, and then he goes to cities with one or two, like one major sports team, something like San Antonio, right? And then if for folks who are like, like and it's not the sort of it's a pretty big city, but it's like not the capital of culture. Everything that happens in New York and LA will happen in San Antonio like 18 months later or whatever. And then he goes and opens like whatever the trendy restaurant is in New York in San Antonio, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so like, by the time the trend gets to San Antonio, he's ready with the brick oven pizza restaurant or whatever it is. And we're kind of like that too. Like these trends can start in New York City and San Francisco, and then maybe like maybe they'll be more in Spain or
I understand.
wherever you happen to be in a year or so. But if you're ready, if you're the one that's ahead of the thing, then you'll be ready with the brick oven pizza restaurant or
Great.
the AI engineering when it hits you, because these things kind of move in predictable ways.
Oh yeah, yeah. Great point. Absolutely fantastic point. Thank you. Uh, you know, this is, I don't know why I'm curious about this, but in your day-to-day work, what brings you the most joy when building Mastra AI? And if what is the main challenge? If you have to eliminate one thing, what will be? And also, what is the thing that brings you the most joy?
Oh gosh, what's the thing that brings me the most joy? Honestly, probably just like watching this like excitement that we were talking about. Like when people kind of discover it and get this like, oh my gosh, wow, like this is incredible, like amazing, like experience. Like I think that's the thing that like makes me the most happy. And like folks will come into Discord and be like, oh my gosh, look at what I built, and I will be like, this is so cool. You know, I don't know.
You guys also have a Discord channel, like a public?
Yeah, we have a public Discord channel. It's linked on the website. But I don't know. Someone built like uh someone dropped a like it was like a wedding planning agent. I was like, okay, like I would never think about like here's how I would arrange all the, the venue and the like. But like, you're like, I wanted to build she's like, I wanted to build a wedding planning agent, and so she built a wedding planning agent, and I was like, it's awesome. Like, uh, just like watching the kinds of like, when you're built a framework, right? Like when you're a framework, you have a lot of primitives and abstractions that you think spend a lot of time thinking about. But the fun part is watching what people do with it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Indeed. Fantastic. Fantastic. Um, where do you get your information? If you, I don't know, the first three persons, Twitter accounts, anything, websites that come into your mind that you use to educate yourself, like to learn stuff,
Yeah.
especially technical one.
Yeah, so I mean the sort of the probably the leading publication in AI world is Swix runs this thing called Latent Space, and so I encourage anybody to like subscribe to that or like follow that on Twitter, or I guess I'll call it Twitter. I can't call it X. I'm sorry. Um, uh, uh, follow that, and that's probably but like there's a lot of like what you'll do is you get into AI engineering is if you're sort of like and a lot of it happens on for whatever reason on Twitter or X, but like you kind of just figure out who the interesting accounts are to follow, and you see somebody and you hit follow, and you see someone else and you hit follow, and you see someone else and you hit follow, and you do this over like 2 or 3 months, and like over time as you do this, you'll just kind of like discover this stuff, and um, but yeah.
I see. Nice. I would add to that on X recently I started to use more and more lists. So instead of relying on the feed, I am just watching particular folks. And
you should share your list. Maybe there's some great folks there. I haven't started using the list feature as much yet, so like maybe I should be following your example here.
Yeah, I'm just adding like people that I found interesting, and after that, people usually share stuff and I branch out more and more and more, and I have a list for AI, a list for book authors, and so on. So yeah, I found it work quite nicely. Yeah.
Cool.
Finally, where can people find you online? I will link the book. I will link, of course, Mastra AI, your Twitter profile. Would you point people to some other place also?
No, I think those are good ones. I mean, my Twitter account is CalcSam. That's CalCSAM. I'll just share, that was my Yahoo account when I was 10, and then so that's where my Twitter handle comes from. If you end up following it.
Yeah, and yeah, also go to Mastra and give it a shot. NPM create Mastra that around latest, and have fun. Have fun. Sam, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure having you as a guest, and
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure being here. Really enjoyed the questions, and like you look forward to like interactions from the community. Please, please tweet me or like whatever, and continue the conversation there and the threads about the threads about the podcast, and happy to respond to any questions folks have. Drop in our Discord if you're like playing around with Mastra. Ask questions there, and this is a great beginning of the conversation. Look forward to continuing it with the community.
Super. Thank you very much. Especially the Discord types. I discovered that the Discord channels are quite fantastic to go like in person, like directly to
Plus, in Discord, you get to meet Abi, and Abi is my co-founder, and Abi is a lot of fun in Discord. So if you Discord, you will see him there.
Okay, super. Sam, thank you very much. Cheers, and keep it up bringing AI tooling to the JavaScript world. Thank you.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.